Welcome, everybody, to our Provo Municipal Council meeting tonight. It is 5:31 on Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. Meetings of the Municipal Council are being held in hybrid fashion. That is, members of the public can view council meetings on YouTube and Facebook, or they may attend in person in the council chambers here at the Provo City Center. I'll remind participants to mute your microphone when not speaking to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up. When not speaking, to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. I will mention that I'm subbing for Chair Travis Hoban, who is going to be joining us online. My name is George Handley. I'm the Vice Chair, and I'm joined on the stand by my fellow councilors, Rachel Whipple, Catrice McKay, and David Shipley. Also, we're joined by City Attorney Brian Jones, John Magnus, our Interim Executive Director, and Mayor Kafusi, Deputy Mayor Paxman. And we are joined online, are we? By Mr. Bill Fillmore on the City Council. And we may expect Travis Hoban to join us. As I mentioned, Shannon Ellsworth is excused today. We'll have begin by having an opening prayer by Paul Oscarson, who will offer that prayer for us. Yes, please. Thanks.
Our Father, which art in heaven, please express gratitude. Participate in society. We're grateful for those who have serving us as a community. Grateful for guidance. Express gratitude for blessings, action, city and nation.
Amen. Thank you. The Pledge of Allegiance will be provided by Councilor Rachel Whipple. Please join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we will now enter our public comment period of the council meeting. Let me share some instructions. As indicated on the screen, a required public hearing will be held for certain agenda items prior to council action. After each item has been presented, time to comment will be provided for all those who wish to speak. For items that do not require a public hearing, public comment will still be taken following presentation of the item, but will be limited to 10 minutes. At this time, up to 15 minutes have been set aside for an open public comment period, which is intended to allow comment on matters that do not appear on tonight's agenda. So anyone who speaks during this time to an item that is on the agenda will not normally be afforded a second opportunity to speak during the comment period specific to that item. During any public comment period, each speaker will generally be limited to 2 minutes. Due to noticing requirements, no formal action will be taken in this meeting on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Those with comments are invited to approach the podium. Those participating on Zoom will need to use the raise hand feature to indicate a wish to comment. The chair may choose to alternate between in-person and online commenters. Please begin your comments by stating your name and city of residence. You will have 2 minutes to speak. To assist the city recorder with the minutes, we ask those commenting in person to print your name on a slip of paper that is provided at the back of the room and place it in the container near the podium. online commenters should spell out their names before commenting. So we'll open it up now for public comment on any item that does not appear on tonight's agenda. All right, seeing no comments from anyone here. I don't know if there's anyone online that wishes to make a comment. If so, please indicate with the raise hand function. Okay, it looks like no. So we will close the public comment period, open comment period, and begin with item number 1 on our action agenda, which is an implied motion on a resolution consenting to the appointment of individuals to various boards and commissions. This will be presented by Mayor Michelle Kafusi.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for allowing me to take a few minutes to appoint 2 members to our boards and commissions. I am recommending the following appointments to Provo City boards and commissions as indicated below and submit the herewith for the councilor's advice and consent. The first is our airport board, and Ann Calder is actually here. Ann, would you like to stand? Ann Calder. Ann grew up at the Provo City Airport and spent those years helping to run the airport. She has flown as a pilot since she was young and has extensive knowledge of the airport and its history. I am recommending Ann be appointed to a 3-year term on the airport board ending June 30th, 2025. And then our Arts Council. I am recommending Barta Heiner be appointed to the Arts Council board. Barta taught acting and directing all over the country and is currently the head of the BFA acting program. She has directed plays at the Covey Center, Health Center Theater, and Denver Center Theater. I am recommending Barta be appointed to a 3-year term on the Arts Council ending June 30th, 2024. Do you have any questions or concerns?
No questions. We met with both individuals earlier, and we appreciate their willingness to serve. We had an opportunity to ask them some questions and get to know them a little bit more. So if no further discussion, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. I'll begin with myself, and I vote yes. Councillor Ellsworth is not here. Councillor Fillmore.
Yes.
Councillor Whipple.
Yes.
Councillor Shipley.
Yes.
Councillor McKay.
Yes.
And Councillor Hoban.
Yes.
Thank you. The vote is 6 in favor and Councillor Ellsworth excused. None opposed. Thank you. We'll turn now to item number 2 on our action agenda, which is a resolution approving a substantial amendment to the program year 2019 annual action plan, reprogramming CDBG-CV funds for COVID-19 public health response. Presenter will be Dan Gonzalez, our management analyst.
Thank you, Mr. Hanley. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. We have the presentation up. Okay. All right. So in early 2020, in March of 2020, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, through the CARES Act, allocated Community Development Block Grant, also nominated as coronavirus, to CDBG entitlements. The city received, between 2 different tranches, a total of a little over $1.2 million. And the use of these funding is with the intent of prevent sorry, I forgot the other 2 terms, but to deal with the pandemic of COVID-19. We have, are you moving the, where am I? Okay. So some of the projects that have been taken on, given that with this particular funding, the normal 15% cap for public services was lifted. A lot of the projects that we have taken on are to assist public service agencies, whether it is to increase the need in their capacity or to provide some specific assistance that was needed for the period of the pandemic. Next slide. We have also assisted or will be assisting some agencies to expand their facilities or to in some way rehabilitate the facilities to also accommodate for COVID-19 issues. A little over $500,000 has also been designated to assist small businesses as a funding gap to assist them in either retaining or recovering workers lost due to the pandemic. Next slide. So the proposal is for today, this is the fourth time we've either allocated or reprogramming funds to assist 4 different projects. The first one is for community action services for the Financial Learning Center. This is an application that was, the project will be satisfied from Provo as well as City of Orem and Utah County. The request is for $25,000. Provo will be participating with $10,367. The second project is for Mountain West Association of Governments, specifically their Aging and Family Services Meal on Wheels meal delivery program for seniors. This is the second round of funding for them. They were awarded $75,000 last summer. They used all of that funding and are still in need. They actually now have a waiting list, so they're hoping to serve citizens in that way. The request is for $75,000, of which Provo will participate with $25,000. Utah Regional Housing, a nonprofit for the Provo City Housing Authority, has properties for supportive housing, and they needed to hire a security firm in order to provide assistance and security services to the facilities as well as the neighborhood around them. The request was for $100,000. We're recommending $42,000, which would accommodate for about 12 months of security assistance for these facilities. And the last project is for United Way, is the expansion of the Franklin South Community Center. The property is owned by Provo City, but leased out to United Way. And they are intending to expand the patio so that they can have an area, an outdoors area where they can hold programming and other activities where it's easier to have space in between those that are attending, again, to support COVID-19 or other similar issues. To fund those projects, what we're recommending is to reprogramming funding from the following 3 programs. From the Small Business Assistance, which I mentioned has a little over $500,000, we are asking to reprogram $1,439. And then 2 other programs, the Mortgage Assistance and Rental Assistance. This is the total funding that was allocated for these 2 programs. We did not use any of that funding. And the reason for that is because we coordinated and collaborated with other agencies, particularly Community Action, to ensure that, that those that were looking for assistance would receive assistance without falling into the duplication of benefits. Because of where the pandemic is at this moment, we believe that it's better to reprogram that funding. Community Action still has a lot of funding available for Provo citizens to assist with either one of those two issues. And we would reprogram that to fund the projects that I just mentioned. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Any questions? Okay, seeing no questions, we'll open this item up for any public comment. All right, seeing no comment from the public, we'll bring it back for council discussion. We did hear this item earlier today and asked some questions earlier. Mr. Gonzalez, any further discussion? Okay, this is the first of 2 hearings, so we will have a second hearing on this and plan on voting on May 17th on the item. Thank you. All right, our next item is related, a resolution, another public hearing on a resolution approving the 3-year annual action plan of the 2020 to 2024 5-year consolidated plan, also presented by Mr. Gonzalez, management analyst.
Thank you, Mr. Hanley. So as mentioned, to receive Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnerships Program funding, those jurisdictions entitled to receive the funding have to write a consolidated plan, a 5-year consolidated plan. And after that, every year with the allocations received, we need to update that through an annual action plan. And that's the presentation today for the 3rd year of that 5-year comp plan. Provo City has received an allocation of CDBG entitlement for about 3 decades or so, and is the only jurisdiction in Utah County that would qualify to receive a direct allocation from HUD to receive the home grant. However, the home program allows for the formation of a consortium with contiguous jurisdictions so that instead of that funding going to the state, it comes back to the community. And we have had a consortium since 1992. Different membership. The current membership is the City of Orem, the City of Lehigh, Utah County. All 3 of them are CDBG entitlement jurisdictions, and Provo City is the 4th member of the consortium. Next. Even though budget has been appropriated, HUD is still in the process of determining final allocations. So we are working with estimated funding using the funding we received in the current year. For CDBG is a little over $1.3 million. We are including program income received of 196 and change, and some finished projects that did not use all of the funding allocated for them, which is 388. So the total available for CDBG is just shy of $2 million. For the home program, the allocation or the estimated amount for allocation is 1.490 with program income of $720,000. So the total is a little over $2.2 million. Next. So since 2019, the 4 CDBG entitlement jurisdictions have joined efforts to streamline the process for particularly public service agencies to minimize the effort in applying for funding and to reduce the administration burden for each one of the entitlements. So a joint CDBG committee is put together with representatives from each of those entitlement cities to review applications from public service agencies and make recommendations. Next. So this is the recommendation from the committee. Not sure where the pointer is going. I don't know if anyway. From the different rows, you can see what was awarded for the current year, what was requested, and then the next 3 columns are the recommendations. At the bottom showing the total for each entitlement jurisdiction. For Provo City, 204,533 is equal to the 15% maximum cap that we can use for public services based on the allocation that we're using as an estimate. Next. Within the Department of Development Services, where we reside, we run 4 programs in-house. One of them is the emergency home repair program. In the past, this program has assisted, it's focused to assist individuals 60 years or older, those with disabilities, or active military individuals or families. And the program was set to do a grant for $7,500 and a loan up to $15,000. With the increased costs, construction costs for rehabilitation, we are proposing to change, and instead of having $7,500 as a grant, to increase it to a $15,000 grant. This program can be only used once by the household or the address that is being served. Next slide. So this is a graphic showing the estimated allocation, adding the program income and the funding from finished projects. That shows the total of almost $2 million available. With the CDBG program, we have the ability to set aside up to 20% of the allocation for administration costs. And then we set aside program delivery. The difference here is program delivery is time spent one-on-one with individuals that are actually receiving a benefit in the programs that are listed there. And the last item on that middle section is the $204,000, which is what we talked about, the 15% cap for public services. At the bottom, then we see the capital projects, suggested capital projects to be funded. The first one is the repayment of the 108 loan. A little over 3 years ago, the city decided to invest future entitlement funding from CDBG in a 108 loan to assist the airport and Duncan Aviation facilities. $2.5 million is what was loaned out. So it's loaned out in advance to finish the project. And then this one is amortized for 10 years. So we're on the third year paying back this funding. And so 252 is set aside to pay interest and principal due at different stages throughout the year. Then we have the listed projects, capital projects. That's the recommendation from the committee. If you want more detail on each one of those, I can provide it. But otherwise, I'll leave it at that. Can I have the next slide? So this is for the home program. Again, we're using estimated funding, 1,495.46. With home, we can only use up to 10% for administration costs. So we're taking that out, 149.56. Home program also requires that we set aside a minimum of 15% for community housing development organizations. And we have active 3 different organizations. They're called CHODOs, but this year only one of them requested funding. That would be rural housing. So the total 15% allocation would be awarded to them. The request is for $2 million. And so the difference between CHODO and what's suggested from the regular home, 1.738, comes up to the request. The other program that is recommended for funding is the Provo City's down payment assistance program. Only $100,000 because we currently have about $350,000 that we're still using. What is unfortunate about the program is with the high costs of housing, as much as we try, we are not making as many loans as we typically do. 4 or 5 years ago, it was not uncommon to have anywhere from 20 to 30 loans. So far, we have made in Provo City 4 loans in this current year. So that is my presentation. Do you have any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Shipley.
Yeah, just a quick question on that final point. So is it a function of some kind of a cap that's put in on how much we can provide for those down payment assistance?
Yes, there are several caps that we have to look at. One of them is the maximum purchase price, which it's not been a problem. The maximum purchase price, which is typically designated by HUD, the home program allows us to do our own market study. And rather than using a lower cap that they have, we were able to use a higher cap. For this year, if you look at Exhibit A, towards the end of the document, would be about 546, which is high. Now, the underside of that is that we're also limited to assist families with no more than 80% of the area median income. For a family of four right now, that's about $67,000. So even though the maximum purchase cap is not a problem, it is an issue to be able to afford a home that is as expensive as that. So the homes where loans have been provided are typically anywhere from $190,000 to $250,000. There are not many homes, unfortunately, available at that price range.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Mr. Gonzalez before we open it up for public comment? Go ahead. Councilor Whipple.
Yes, so when you're talking about the emergency home repair program and increasing the grant amount, would people still be able to get the additional $15,000 loan?
No, it would be just the grant.
It's only the grant then?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no questions, we'll open it up for public comment. Any members of the public who'd like to address this item? Please come forward. If you can state your name, that would be helpful. And
My name is Karen Snow, and if I may, I would like to just remind all of us that the homeowners in the community have fixed incomes, basically. And so when all the funds that are being asked for to help complete projects that have been started and cannot be finished without additional funds, I think that they need to remember that the taxes that we pay every year is fixed. I mean, that doesn't change unless the resources in the community and all combined have an increase. So in hopes that everyone that has an opportunity to ask for a grant to have to provide a project for home building or raising the prosperity in the community, need to remember that all the people that live in the city have to pay for these from the resources that they have alone. And most of them are affixed to a certain income, especially the elderly in our community. So we need to remember, and it is stated in the letter that was sent to our home, that issuers will not ask for increased taxes. So I hope and pray that everyone will realize that we have a budget to keep. And yes, we would all like to have more money to fix all the projects that we've started. But sometimes we might have to have more patience and more control over what we're using. Thank you.
thank you. Other comments from the public? All right, I'll bring it back to the council for any further discussion on this item. This too is going to be heard again at a second opportunity. So this is just the first of two hearings. All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. We'll move on to item number 4 on our action agenda, an implied motion on a resolution appropriating $10,000 in the council office in the general fund for upgrades to the council chambers. The funding source of the appropriation is fund balance in the general fund. And this is presented by John Magnus, our interim council executive director.
Good evening, council. What we're asking for is $10,000. When the new building was designed 2.5 years ago, Zoom was not on anybody's radar. So it was not designed to be a Zoom room. COVID has taught us that we're going to go with electronic meetings. They're not going away. So we want to create an integrated system so it's not patched together like this room is right now where we have problems. So we've been working with the vendor. They're working on the price, but we're asking for $10,000 up front so all the wiring can be put in prior to the building being finished. That way you don't have to come back, cut in new boxes, cut in the new walls, ruin our paint jobs, just so the wiring's in place. And so when we actually can get the equipment, because unfortunately it's going to be a 7 to 10 month lead time on it, it'll be ready to be installed. That is what the request is for tonight.
All right, thank you, Mr. Magnus. Any questions for Mr. Magnus? We'll open this up for any comment from the public. Oh, sorry, Counselor Whipple has a question for you.
Thank you. I was wondering, so that $10,000, is that just for the wiring that we'll need to do, or will that do everything to make it a Zoom?
That's just the
capable?
wiring.
That's
We're
just
still
the
working on
wiring.
the price. We're looking about $65,000 to $90,000. Unfortunately, they can't give us the exact prices right now because of shortages and some of the parts aren't available and they can't get pricing themselves. We're working through that right now.
So this is a preliminary thing to get the wiring in before the walls are finished getting built.
Yes.
So that way it'll be easy to put on the next things once we get that bid.
Right. It will just be equipment and software at that point and don't have to go back and tear into our new building.
Thank you.
All right, any comment from the public on this item? Okay, seeing no comment, we'll bring it back for any further discussion from the council. All right, seeing no comments, then I will call for a vote on the implied motion, and I'll begin with Counselor Fillmore,
Yes.
Counselor Whipple,
Yes.
Counselor Shipley,
Yes.
Counselor McKay,
Yes.
Chair Hoban.
Yes.
I will, George Hanley, vote yes. Counselor Ellsworth is excused, so that's 6 votes in favor, none opposed, and 1 excused. We'll go on to item number 5, which is an ordinance amending Provo City Code, chapters 6.15.110, conditions on commercial entertainment businesses, and 9.14.120, treatment for addicts prohibitions, to bring them into alignment with state law. This will be presented by Brian Jones, our city attorney.
Thank you, Chair Handley. This is not nearly as complicated as that title makes it sound. As you're probably aware, state law actually prohibits the city from having any gun regulations that the state doesn't expressly allow us to have. So for instance, they allow us to prohibit the discharge of firearms in the city, and we do. There are a couple of sections. There were some recent bills about this in the last legislative session too that reinforced that point. We noticed in reviewing those, there's a couple sections in our code that even though we've never enforced them that way, might be construed to apply to somebody even when they're carrying a firearm legally, either open carry or with a valid concealed permit. And so we've just proposed a couple of clarifications to make sure that that's not what they say, just to say that they're only prohibiting firearms carried in contrary to state law. It's not imposing an additional requirement. So you might want to, I don't know if you can scroll up a little bit farther, Malia, so they can see both of them at the same time. Right there, yeah. So we're just proposing 2 small tweaks to long existing sections of code to just specifically reference that we're not prohibiting anything that state law allows.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Jones? Seeing none, I'll open it up for public comment. Any comment from the public? You can come up.
If I may say, does the program really want to help with the treatments of the addicts and the prohibitions? Because we know that this is mostly a self-inflicted situation. And I truly believe that we need education to help teach our people what they need to do to help themselves to rectify their situation. And so if this is to really put forth the effort to provide for programs for these individuals to go to, then I hope and pray that we will vote yes to support that. If there is a way that we can help these people, and some of them might be our families, our friends, that they need to get this kind of help, especially if children are involved. And so it's really important that we be able to be clear on this, on the treatment for addicts and the prohibitions, because once we get involved, it's a forever situation. It's kind of a personal battle between heaven and the other, deciding which side we're going to be on. So I hope and pray that we'll all make a good decision concerning this and use our funds to really help the honest and the true in heart. Thanks.
Thank you. Did you get her name again? Yeah, okay. All right. Any other?
Karen Snow.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay, we'll bring it back for the council for any discussion. Seeing no discussion, I'll call for a vote on the implied motion. We'll begin with Councilor Whipple,
Yes.
Councilor Shipley,
Yes.
Councilor McKay,
Yes.
Chair Hoban.
Yes.
I, George Handley, will vote yes. Councilor Ellsworth is excused. Councilor Fillmore.
Yes.
That was 6 votes in favor, 0 against, and 1 excused. We'll move on to item number 6. We're just flying through these items tonight. A presentation on the quarterly financial report for the second quarter of 2022. John Borgett, our Director of Administrative Services, will be our presenter.
Okay, it's insert 24, about page 18.
Yes, Chair Hanley and the Honorable Council, I'm pleased to come in and present our quarterly report for the second quarter of fiscal 22, ending December 31st. This is halfway through the year, and it just kind of gives us a little bit of an indication of how things are looking. This actually shows some graphs and just provides some high-level information to kind of give you an idea. I know it was back here just a month or so ago on the first quarter. But if we go to the second page. Okay, one more page, sorry. Okay, the purpose of the quarterly report is to give unaudited summary information to the reader about Provo City's revenue and expenses for the second quarter, ending December 31st, 2021. The quarterly report contains financial data, comparing previous year revenue and expenses to current year actual revenue expenses, along with a 5-year comparison for each. There's also graphs and information that helps. No data on revenue and expenses is final until it's audited, so we just caution you with that, but this is an interim report. You go to next page. This is just kind of a summary of the revenues and transfers in. And as I mentioned, we're halfway through the year, so roughly you would expect things to, if they're on target with the budget, to be at 50%. You can see right now our revenues in total are at 59%. So we are ahead of the budget. And then also our transfers in are at 54%. So they're also ahead. We're going to get into more of the details. So flip to the next page. This is our revenues overall. And I provided just kind of a little highlighted section that just kind of shows our revenues for the general fund are up 8% over the prior year as a whole. And you can see that they're also up similarly on the budget. The number to the left of the 8% sign, to the blue bar there is the prior year, and then the red to the right is the budget. Transferred in are also coming in positively. If we go to the next page, this shows our sales tax revenue. This is our strongest source of revenue right now. We're actually up 15%. For our sales tax revenue. We've also received the January distribution, which was 1 month beyond this, ending in December. Similar trend. We're anxious. We should be getting the next month, which will be February, within the next week. I'm anxious to see how, if we continue to see that trend. We're all concerned with inflation and with potential impacts from the economy, but up to this point, we continue to see strong revenues through the state of Utah and also for the city. Also, our RAP tax, which is our recreation, arts, and parks tax, which is based on sales tax, we're up similar 15% there as well. We go to the next page. This shows it's one of the areas that we are down this year, and we've been watching it closely, but our developmental fees for our building permits and inspections are down about 29%. We mainly attribute this to some large projects that's finished over the last couple of years and a timing issue. We don't think this really indicates that we're in trouble from a building perspective, but sometimes it's hard to tell, particularly when we've got large projects like we have in Provo and the downtown area and very roundabout, that sometimes there can be a little bit of a timing issue. I will mention, though, that in the budget that we're going to be presenting to the council in May, that we anticipate this trend to still continue to where our overall development services revenues are not as strong. Parks and Rec, we're up 11%. We're slightly off the budget, but talking to Scott and the Parks and Rec team, they feel like by the time we get through with the year, we're going to be fine from a budget perspective. So they are up significantly from the previous year and slightly off the budget, but we should be okay. If you go to the next page, this shows our franchise fees are pretty much on budget. Justice court revenues, we're actually up 23% above the prior year, but we're significantly below the budget. When we budgeted for fiscal 22, we were hopeful that as we get through the pandemic, that things would get back to normal. Just hasn't quite happened yet. I would mention, though, that within the last week, we got some additional information from the state judicial system, and they have given us the ability to step it up and get close to back to full to normal. And so hopefully we'll see the revenues come up as a result of that. Go to the next page. This just kind of shows the overall general fund summary, similar to what we looked at on an earlier page, just providing a little bit more detail. And you can see that our expenses are our revenues are 59%, and then our expenses are at 43%, which is lower than the 50%, which is good. So both of those are trending positively. Go to page 8. This just kind of shows what appropriations have been spent this year out of the general fund, and they're listed there. We've appropriated about $1,850,000 this year, and so it just provides the council with a summary of what those appropriations were for. Also, our innovation fund, this just kind of gives you an up-to-date report on where we're at, what was spent for the quarter, and the projects that we're currently working on through the innovation fund. We go to page 9. This is the library, and you can see here that we are up about 7% over the prior year. We heard from Gene Nelson earlier today on the budget, gave us a good overview, and things are pretty much back to normal at the library and trending well, and we feel good about it. Go to page 10. This is the golf course. Golf course was not fully up, but they were getting there last year. But you can see we're up 125% over the previous year. And I would mention that you can see we're right close to budget, and we expect through the end of the year to be at or slightly above budget. And so things are going well at the golf course. Go to the next page. This is our water fund. And as you look there, a lot of times it just depends on the weather and the seasonality, but overall, water revenues seem to be okay. We're slightly off the budget, but we'll kind of watch that through the year and see what happens. And of course, with restrictions and everything, we'll have to wait and see what happens with the state and our water. If you go to the next page, you can see our wastewater fund. We're actually up 11%. We did have a rate increase last year of 10%, and so it's trending about where we would expect to be for 22. If you go to the next page, energy, as you can see, we're slightly ahead of the prior year and also slightly ahead of budget overall revenues. and no concerns with energy. Next page. This provides us the airport. We are up about 43% on our revenues for the airport. And a lot of that has to just do with increased operations happening there and more happening. And of course, we're all excited to see the new terminal open and to move forward there. The next page, this is sanitation, pretty much normal there. And then the next page is our storm drain facility, the same. And then we have our transportation utility. And so that's kind of the quarterly report, just kind of in a nutshell to give you kind of an overview of where things are at and trending. I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Councilor McKay.
I am curious, miscellaneous is so high, especially compared to last year. What do you contribute that to and what's it coming from?
And on which, was that on the general fund page? I would have to go back. I'll send you an email and let you know. There are several things that roll up in that we try to make sure that when we have miscellaneous that we, if it's something large enough that we break it out and show it independently, but sometimes things will show up there. So I will go back and look at that and get back with you. But right now I couldn't tell you.
Thanks.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
You stumped me. Okay. Any other questions?
Other questions? I have sort of a theoretical question, and
Okay.
maybe I should remember some answer to this from previous presentations, but at what point do you start to feel confident enough that you can reallocate funds knowing or believing that you're going to end up in the surplus? Yeah, I mean, is that judgment made in each of those categories individually? Or are you looking at the overall trends and saying, oh, it looks like we've got excess funds that we can then, push towards other kinds of projects that we might have to make sure that we're taking advantages of the surplus that we have? Or what do we need to wait another quarter before we're confident that this year is going to be as positive as it looks?
Well, I would make a couple of comments. First thing that I would mention is that we have appropriated almost $2 million out of fund balance on important projects this year. And so we already have spent a significant portion of that amount that we're over. The other thing that what I tend to try to do is wait till the end of the year where possible to see if there's any other things that show up or to seek specifically where we're at. I know that we've got some different things that the council has done as far as with carryovers and fund balance and whatnot. And so, and we also have fund balance that's out there right now from previous years that give us the ability to meet certain needs. So my preference is I'm always supportive of appropriations, but to get through the year and kind of get the information audited and know specifically where we're at and then move in after that.
Okay, thank you. Well, we certainly appreciate the regular presentations to keep us apprised of this, and it certainly looks very encouraging. I'm very glad to see that.
Okay, thank you, Chair Hanley.
Okay. All right, we'll open this up for any public comment. Okay, seeing no comment, I'll bring it back. There's no action that is necessary for this particular item. So unless there's any other discussion, I'll thank Mr. Borgett for his time, and we'll move on to item number 7, which is an implied motion on a resolution appropriating $100,000 in the mayor's office in the general fund for costs related to the My Hometown initiative. And this will be presented by Mr. Borgett, it looks like.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, it is the recommendation of administration that we appropriate $100,000 from general fund balance for costs related to administering the My Hometown initiative. For those that may not be aware of what it is, I'm just going to give a brief summary here. The My Hometown initiative is a pilot program that was first started in West Valley City, and Provo City has now been invited to be the second city to participate. The initiative is a partnership between the city and Provo residents and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, with the purpose of building camaraderie and strengthening friendships with neighborhoods, build common leadership, and resilience and enhance educational opportunities with the neighbors. I would mention that the initiative works by having the city provide leadership, connections, and resources, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints provide a facility, and volunteer neighbors provide leadership as block captains and promote communication and friendship. Nonprofit groups work with us to maximize our joint efforts. Members and leaders of our other faiths are invited to participate. Mentioned here, the volunteers work with Provo City, will identify service projects which include neighborhood cleanup and other revitalization projects like painting, fence repair, sidewalk repair, landscaping, tree removal. The volunteers will also establish a community resource center. And it just mentions that the CRC, which is the Community Resource Center, will be located in a church building which will be used during the week. The requested funding will help to establish the resource center by providing banners and signage, name tags for the volunteers, safety vests, meals for the community activities, and to assist with the days of service. This funding will be in addition to the in-kind services the city will offer to the success initiative of this project. I would mention that both Dixon Holmes and Tara Riddle have been signed, the individuals that have been assigned to work with these volunteers and help coordinate this effort. Tara is here tonight if you have any questions specifically about the initiative. I would just make note on the appropriation. We estimate that this $100,000 is approximately provide a year of opportunity. This initiative will actually be 2 years, and so this will get us through the first year. As the fact that we are towards the end of our fiscal year, it's hard to believe I say that, but we are within a couple months being done. We have included in this recommendation for this appropriation that the funds be allowed to be carried over so they can continue to be used after July 1st. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And as I mentioned, Tara is here to answer any questions as well.
Councilor Shipley.
So the 100,000 is probably going to be for the first year. How big geographically do we expect the program to be within that first year?
Okay, I'm going to let.
No, it's going to start kind of smaller, right? So
I'm going to let Tara respond to that. She'll be able to answer it a lot better than me.
Good evening. So we've actually designated 2 neighborhoods that we're going to be working in. The first is what we've titled the Pioneer Park neighborhood, which is just to the west of us, from 5th West to 7th West, from Center Street to just south of the railroad tracks. The other neighborhood is called the South Freedom, which is just north of the mall. So it's basically south of the railroad tracks, just to the west of Community Action on Freedom Boulevard, over to approximately 5th West.
So does the $100,000 budget for the first 12 months just cover those 2?
Correct.
Kind
so
of a pilot of this?
Yeah, so a lot of that money is going to actually be going towards setting up the community resource centers. So with our partnership with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they're going to set up the first, what we're calling the CRC, the Community Resource Center. So they'll be setting up the one in the South Freedom Building, which is just off the roundabout at 820 South and 2nd West. And then the city is going to be setting up the one that's over in Pioneer Park, which is the church just north of Franklin Elementary School.
Thank you.
Any other, let's see, looks like I have a hand up here from Mr. Hoban. Go ahead.
Maybe I missed this. I'm curious, do we have a value placed on the contribution the church will be making towards this initiative? So we're putting in $100K. Do we know what the value of what they'll be putting in?
So I don't know a monetary amount, but they are actually letting us use their facilities rent-free, and they're providing the mass majority of the volunteers. So if you consider all the expertise that they're bringing in, because they're being very particular about the volunteers. So these are retired teachers, accountants, people that'll be teaching the classes as well as running the days of service. So I would say that we are by far getting the better side of the deal.
Okay. And I know that this has been done in other cities. Did any other cities place in calculate an ROI on, based on the results that they had?
I know West Valley City does have some reports, which I'm happy to send out to the council if you want to see those. They've done breakdowns of what they feel the returns are on the investment.
Actually, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yep, I can do
Send
that.
those out. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll open this item up for any public comment. I see one person online whose number ends in 1192. Go ahead. Is it *6 they need to push to be able to speak? Go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Melanie McCord. I am reading here the Dead Deseret News article about when West Valley City instituted this operation in my hometown. And it's interesting, the headline says that it's city, corporate, and church resources to fix up an area dominated by slumlords. I'm going to the West Valley City site and I'm looking at the things, the kind of services that this provides. This looks to me very much like the stuff that NeighborWorks used to do, or that some of the neighborhood programs that we used to do with Paint Your Heart Out and those kind of things. Is this taking the place of any of those other programs? Have we backed out of any partnership with NeighborWorks or with any of the rest of those things that we used to do? I don't know. It seems to me like in a community like ours that's so volunteer oriented anyway, to throw $100,000 at this thing that may be a redundant program doesn't seem really necessary. I think you could hire a police officer for that amount of money. So, and I don't think I'm in favor of this. I think I'm in favor of strengthening the neighborhood program so that any of these efforts get worked through our existing programs, not starting a brand new one. But, inform me if I'm wrong, because I just don't see the point of this. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. McCord. Any other comments from the public? Yes, please.
Becky Bogdan, Provo, Utah. I'm really in favor of this program. My neighborhood is just right south of these. My kids go to school with a lot of these kids. And these two neighborhoods are very much in need of something like this. These are not like other neighborhoods within the city. These are neighborhoods that could benefit highly from anything that we can give them. They need people in their community that can help them and show them of the things that they can do. And in my opinion, just with my experience as being a neighborhood chair, that's not something that you can accomplish with a neighborhood program. This is something that really has to be done in the way that it's being done. And I'm all in favor for it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comment from the public? Please.
Hello there. My name is Eric Kim. And in reading about this, I had heard about this program before, just through some other related things. And like our friend online said, I had a bit of a comment about the marred slumlords comment that I believe it was the newspaper that made that statement and not the hometown initiatives themselves. But I wanted to say that while I agree that the hometown initiative would be a benefit to the community in general, and fostering a bond in the community, that the apartments or the slumlords, the owners of the apartments, would not be the problem in general. And I was a little bit concerned about the outreach towards some of the other residents, because I'm the only one who knows that that I know who knows about this this program, and for me that's a little disheartening because I think a lot of people my age, I'm an undergrad student in computer engineering at BYU. A lot of people like me are looking for reasons to stay in Provo and possibly have the option to put down roots here. Currently, as things stand, we can't really have that right now because of the exorbitant housing prices. And so for that reason, any money that can be invested into the communities, I feel is a good idea. But I think more efforts into spreading the news about this program would go a long way towards keeping younger generations that are looking to live and work in this town in Provo.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? Please.
Paul Oscarson. It's interesting that I just within the last week had a conversation with an individual who is very much familiar with the program and familiar with the results that have been achieved in West Valley City. And the only thing that I would suggest is that if we haven't done that already, that I'm sure that there is a lot of information and feedback from them that might help to support the idea of going forward with this. Everything that I have heard and understand about the results there has been that it's been very positive, not only in terms of how it has affected these areas and neighborhoods, but what it has meant to the community in terms of enlisting volunteers and the community spirit that has been generated as a result of the program as well. So that there are benefits beyond just the physical that might be achieved, and whatever information might be available from West Valley City might be helpful in reinforcing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for discussion. Councilor McKay.
If I remember correctly, the mayor did present to us and did highlight a lot of the ROI or return on investment, so to speak. There was discussion about lowering crime and increasing property values and bringing more neighborhood connectiveness and involvement and neighborhood spirit. It was quite a long presentation that she did, if I remember correctly, and I was very sold on it from the details from West Valley and the expectation. I think we're going to have a significant return on investment from 100,000. And like the young gentleman mentioned, some of this 100,000 will go to educating the public on it. And there will be captains within the neighborhoods that will help spread the word to and be leaders in those neighborhoods to spread all the information. But I am really excited about it.
Other comments from the council? I'll also add my enthusiasm for this. I'm eager to see it spread sooner than later, actually. But I do understand the need to do this, sort of as an isolated experiment. But I think it's an extraordinary opportunity to transform a lot of empty, unused space that the church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has during the week. For the benefit of the community. So I think that's an extraordinary transition that is, from my perspective, very welcomed, and I think it'll be a great benefit to our community. Mr. Fillmore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm really excited about this. I think this unlocks all kinds of potential. I think Provo should feel honored to be invited to participate in this program. My hope is that we'll collaborate in such a way that it'll be a rousing success and we can extend it to other neighborhoods who could benefit from such a program.
Mr. Hoban.
Yeah, hopefully nobody takes my questions the wrong way as not being excited about the program. And I was excited about the program after the presentation by the mayor last time. I think I'm wondering if I'm $100,000 excited now that we have a dollar figure on what we'll need to contribute. So that's the only reason I'm kind of, was looking for, something to quantify some of these aspects of it. But don't get me wrong. I mean, the program, I think it'll be great. I guess I'm just wrapping my brain around the price tag, but you have to invest. So I get that.
Thank you, Mr. Hoban. I think for speaking for myself, I understood where your question was coming from. I think it's an important one to ask. I think I think the return is less monetary than it is. Well, I think probably it can be monetized if we think about what it would save the cost to the community if when people are helped and enabled to provide for themselves and be more productive in their lives. That's a pretty complex thing to try to monetize exactly, but I think it definitely feels to me like an investment worth making, especially the potential this has for transforming, again, this sort of community orientation of these neighborhoods and these resources. So thank you.
Yeah, right. No, you're right. It's a good point.
Councilor Shipley.
Yeah, I've been thinking ever since, I think it was Ms. McCord mentioned the article title about how this could turn into a subsidy for bad landlords, right? So if I'm an out-of-state investor and I purchase in a certain neighborhood, if I know that this initiative exists, perhaps that subsidizes basically me in caring for property that I should be financially caring for. And I guess I'm not clear on how the program could protect against that. I don't want it to become a motivator for outside investors that are bad actors to exploit this program, from an investment standpoint and make it worse, help them in a way that we're not trying to help them. We're trying to help the people, right, that are in these places. And I guess you might not be able to remove one from the other, unfortunately, but I'm just trying to think through and maybe just thinking out loud, like I don't want that to create an incentive.
Well, maybe that's a good reason why we'll do it kind of in a phased approach and see how it goes. Yes, please.
Maybe this will make you feel a little more comfortable. We're being very particular, so any improvements that we're doing will be on owner-occupied homes. So the only time that we'd be doing anything on rental properties is if it's landscaping that the renter would be responsible for, and if they're needing assistance with labor.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. Yeah, go ahead.
So when we found out about this program, it was a little bit of a surprise. Like, we didn't have a lot of heads up before we found out that the church had selected us to be the second place that they were doing this program. And I did not know that it was going to be $100,000 then. It's just this great opportunity. But I think the reason that this is really valuable is because even though, as Ms. McCord said, there are other community services and things like this, this brings a really intensive focus and a lot of manpower and woman power into engaging with people who don't necessarily have the capacity to go out and find services on their own, right? And one of my friends in the neighborhood has already been selected as a block captain, and creating these dense social networks, pulling people in, getting them access to resources, and building those social ties, those community things are what really helps this program to be successful. Because it's not just the investment in the landscaping and the houses and things like that, even though that's part of it, it's you are really community building. So I am really excited for this and what it means for the people who live here. These are people who, in many cases, have been left behind. And we need to take care of each other. And this is a good opportunity to do that.
Councilor Hoban.
Well, gosh, after that comment, I'm convinced All right. I'm there. Thanks.
Okay. You sure? All right. Well, if there's no further discussion, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. And we'll begin with, I don't remember who I began with last time. Counselor, did I begin with you last time? Counselor Whipple?
Yes.
Counselor Shipley?
Yes.
Counselor McKay?
Yes.
Chair Hoban?
Yes.
And I, George Handley, will vote yes, and Counselor Fillmore.
Yes.
And Shannon Ellsworth is excused, so that's 6 in favor, none opposed. Okay, we'll now turn to item 8. 8 and 9 will both be presented by Dave Decker. This is a public hearing regarding the issuance of a $10 million issuance of up to $10 million of wastewater revenue bonds for construction costs of new and upgraded wastewater treatment plant facilities and the potential economic impact of the project on the private sector, presented by Dave Decker, Director of Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Hanley, and thank you to the council tonight. We have a presentation. It's going to be a team effort, and like many things in public works, it takes a pretty wide variety of people to get things to happen. And so we have several people from our wastewater group here tonight. Also business manager Jimmy McKnight from Public Works. We also have some support from finance and some outside counsel also that will do presentations on this particular item. I thought it would be good to have just a quick presentation about why the bonds are being talked about tonight, instead of just diving into the financial details. We probably ought to talk just a little bit about the reason behind the bond. This is a plan view of the wastewater treatment plant that's been under construction for about 2 years now. This is from an older presentation, and we're going to focus largely on part of the navy blue building that's kind of in the middle of the treatment plant. And I'll point out for the public, the gray background behind it is from an air photo, and it illustrates the existing treatment plant before the construction started. Just really quickly, the original treatment plant was built in 1956. It was using a process called trickling filters, pretty common in the 1950s. That was the first method of treatment for wastewater. Most people don't know that before Provo had a treatment plant in 1956, sewage was going directly into Utah Lake, and Provo was actually the second city in the state of Utah to have a treatment plant, only preceded by Salt Lake City. And so that kind of puts a little perspective on what we're talking about tonight. I'll advance forward, skipping a lot of history here. In 2015, there was a master plan done on the treatment plant, and it identified a number of problems at the treatment plant and provided a cost estimate to rebuild the treatment plant just using kind of the middle of the road process commonly known today. And that cost estimate was about $60 million to just replace it with a pretty basic treatment process. The recommendation in that particular report was to go to what they call a bioreactor, MBR. It's a membrane bioreactor treatment plant. It's the advanced treatment process. It's commonly used in states, particularly in Arizona and California now. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute here. The project, again, I'm skipping significant information, significant history here, but the project started moving forward in about 2018. We started the design process, and a couple of decisions were made that were critical. One, we went to what they call a CMGC. That's a general contractor, construction manager method of construction. So one of the advantages of that process is to not wait until the design is fully completed. Many of the projects that Public Works and other departments in the city put out to bid, we do what they call the design bid build. And so you go through a design phase, you have it completely designed, and then you bid it out, and then you start the construction on it. Because of the size of the project going into this, we knew that we could not wait until we had the plant completely designed. It just wouldn't feasibly work that way and most effectively. So we actually broke the project out into different phases, different packages, and that's what's illustrated on the screen here. So we started, actual construction was started in a package called 1A, and it was put out, and it's primarily the demolition of the original trickling filters built in 1956 and the excavation for the new building that was going in place. That package is actually done. It's completed as of March of this year. Package 1 was issued in December of 2020. And it was largely what they call the ground improvements. So a lot of the foundation work. Several presentations ago, I gave the council a little bit of an idea what was happening, but we were drilling caissons, concrete pillars into the ground about 40 feet deep. And then as we pulled that drill rig back out, we filled that with concrete. And that was establishing the foundation, especially important at the location in East Bay, because of groundwater, and so we were building the foundation for the building. That package is nearly done. Package 1 had some electrical work in it also, and that electrical work has been ordered but has not been quite delivered. It's a delivery issue that's slowed package 1 down, but most of package 1 is done. Package 2 was issued to the contractor in the fall of last year in 2021, and it was the remainder of the project, and I'll show a picture of that portion of the project. What happened with package 2, and I'm skipping just a little bit ahead here, package 2, when we got the cost estimates for package 2 in the fall of last year, the project, let me go back one slide, you'll notice right here, the total project construction cost was about $95 million with those 3 packages, and that was the original construction for the entire project. When we received package 2 cost estimates to finalize the contract for package 2, estimates were about $20 million higher than anticipated. And there's a series of design that goes on. We get design plans at 30%, 60%, and 90% drawings for the project in each of those packages. And you can probably, backtrack in your mind what was happening with construction prices over the last 18 months or so. And we felt like we were beating most of the inflation that was hitting the construction until we got to package 2. Package 2 had 2 issues that showed very high cost increases, both in concrete and in steel, which is mostly what the treatment plant is built with. So it hit package 2 significantly, the rising costs. When package 2 was provided, the information was provided to Public Works, we made the decision primarily to move forward on package 2 and provide a mechanism to allow the treatment plant to move forward instead of delaying all of package 2 and having it subject to even more inflation that's happening even worse today. We move forward with package 2 with an idea of using the aeration basins for part of the bioreactors, and I'll show a part of this information. The state, you'll know, and again, part of the history that I skipped through, the state DEQ was very anxious to have this project move forward. One of the things that we did in 2018 was we approached DEQ for a loan from the state revolving loan fund. It's a common approach to build significant infrastructure in the state. The state, we originally asked for $120 million. The state, because of other competing projects, the state issued a $78 million package. It had $2 million in loan forgiveness, so it was basically a grant at 0.5%. So that's 1/2 of 1% interest, 0.5%. So when we went back to the state and explained what was happening with the project with package 2, they were very concerned about moving forward with the project in the right way. And I'll describe a little bit when in the next slide, why it's important to have the bioreactors in place. So the state eventually came back to us in December of last year. They indicated that they had some additional funding, mostly through the ARPA funding, the American Rescue Plan Act that came from the federal government. They offered a package to us at the same interest rate, 0.5%. They offered a $10 million loan to close the gap and a $5 million grant. So it left a $3 million difference between the bioreactor increase costs and the offer that they provided to us. So we indicated to the state that that we would figure out how to close that gap, most likely with city issued ARPA funding. And I'll explain this is a concept drawing of the bioreactor right here. So you'll see in the next photo, there's actual photo of this. This is the fine screens building. This is the membrane building right here. And the bioreactors run between those two buildings. And those bioreactors, the reason that they're important, they have three different phases of, and I apologize, I'm probably getting into a little bit of the weeds here, but I think the council, particularly after a recent field trip, will understand. The bioreactors have three different phases of oxidation that happen in them. And because of those different phases, they're able to treat phosphorus, nitrogen, and other elements that go into Utah Lake. And that was important to DEQ. If we use the aeration basins, the way the interim plan was built, we could not get nitrogen out. DEQ has indicated to us that additional regulations will be likely coming somewhere around the year 2030. And to build the treatment plant the correct way and anticipate those future regulations is really important. And it's the recommendation that I make to the city is it's important to anticipate coming regulations. So it would take phosphorus to a very extreme low level. It would also deal with nitrogen that is not currently in the regulations. So my recommendation, this is the photo of under construction. This is only a couple of days old. And you can see the fine screen buildings over here on the right-hand side. Fine screen building is under construction right here. This space between that's missing right here, that's the bioreactor space that we're talking about tonight. And the membrane building, you can see the foundation work and the walls going up for the membrane building right there. So it's well under construction, and again, the primary issue here is the rising costs that affected that package too, and just trying to close the gap on that. One other thing that I'll point out before we go into additional elements here, this is a copy of information that was sent out to residents. We're getting a couple of questions on this, and I need to clarify just a couple of points. One of the items involves this first 3 years of repayment starting in 2025, 26, and 27. And one of the questions that we're getting is why are we only paying $50,000 back in principal instead of a higher amount? And it's really an offer that the state made. They were trying to accommodate other wastewater projects, and knowing that the city is trying to accomplish several things related to wastewater. And so they lowered that principal. We're not obligated to do that. If the funding's there to make higher principal payments, we certainly can do that. But this is an offer that came from the state. The other primary question that we're receiving also is this statement in the lower part, this last paragraph right here, talking about the 47-cent increase per 1,000 gallons running between the year 2022 and 2043. And we probably should have worded this a little bit clearer, indicating that 40-cent increase is part of the increase that we recommended on wastewater this year, but it will not run every single year. The 47 cents will stay in place through 43, but there's not a 47-cent increase each following year. And that's the other consistent question that we're getting. Having said that, I've told the council before that it's probably not wise strategy, financial strategy, for your utility rates to stay stagnant for a long period of time. It's one of the issues that led to some of the issues that we're facing today. And so there likely will be increases in the coming years, but they'll be more in line with rates of inflation and probably much smaller rate increases. I do have to tell the council just one other comment. I recognize over the last 7 years, there's been significant rate increases, particularly in the wastewater area, and I recognize the impact to residents and don't minimize the effects on residents. There's been a couple of challenges, facing Public Works to try to meet the regulations, the water quality regulations that have been coming at us from the state of Utah, and also recognizing trying to put those into place with the financial situation with the utility billing. So having said that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or if there's additional questions, during the presentation, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Decker. I just want to clarify, we have 2 items on the agenda, and the second one is a resolution authorizing the issuance of wastewater revenue bonds of Provo City, Utah, authorizing the execution and delivery of a supplemental indenture and other documents required in connection with the bonds. Did you want to clarify, is the first item that we already cited is open for a required public hearing, which I will open in just a moment, but was there anything else you wanted to add about number 9?
So I'm going to leave that to the rest of the team. You got some really good financial people sitting behind me, and they're going to talk about some of the details about the bond, the requirements through DEQ. So Dan Follett will cover part of that. We also have a gentleman, Eric Hunter, who will provide some significant detail for the council as well.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question. Did you want to say something?
I was just going to clarify something about what you just said. Our normal, it's a little bit out of our normal practice. Our normal practice is to have one agenda item, hold the public hearing as part of the agenda item, and then vote on it. When we do these bonds, bond counsel likes us to list them on the agenda as 2 separate items. It's really the same item. Item 8 is having the public hearing on it, and item number 9 is voting on it. That's the only difference between the 2 of them.
That makes a lot more sense to me. Thank you. All right. I do have a question for you, Mr. Decker. And it's actually partly to refresh my memory, but also for the sake of the public. I think I'm the only member of the council who was here because I remember this very, very early in my time on the council when we were contemplating the cost of a new wastewater treatment plant. We were contemplating different ways to pay for it. We were looking at a bond. And we looked at utility increases as one way to pay for it. And then I think it was sometime after that the state loan became available, and that quickly became, for reasons that I can't remember all of the details, but I remember being, I remember we walked through that very carefully, and we were concerned very much about the impact it was going to have on individuals and households in the city. It seemed like there was no way to do this without that impact being felt, right? And this was around the time when lots of other things were going on in the city, including a need for a new public safety building and so on. Is there anything you can say about that process that would be helpful for me and for the public to I have this image of a graph, and I could go back and look at the meetings, but I remember looking at, the impact this would have over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years in terms of the cost to the average household in Provo. And we did what we thought, we kind of opted for what we thought was going to be the most financially feasible and least painful method of doing it. That being said, obviously, again, there's still pain associated with it. But are there any details about that process that you feel like I could remember more clearly than that?
Well, a couple of things that I'll mention. I think the council at the time, this is about 2016, 2017, 18 timeframe, maybe early 18. And we were going through a number of options, financial options. And I think the council called the graphs. Jimmy was preparing them, and they looked a little like spaghetti. And there were comments made about, all the different graphs going different, illustrating different points. But there were about 3 different primary financing methods that we were looking at based on the council direction. And one of them was trying to pay for it directly outright without any kind of a loan. And obviously that had the most significant impact very quickly on residents. We had to ramp up rates significantly because we have to raise a lot of capital very quickly to pay for a project that the state's telling us we've got, until 2020. And by the way, I'll remind the council, there was a variance letter that was issued to the city that allowed us to put off those water regulations until 2025. But it was in part to do this project. So again, the other financing mechanisms that we were looking at loans. And so there was a variety of loans that we were considering. And then there was also some other treatment options that we were considering that were less money. But we spent quite a bit of time with the council talking about the pros and cons of the different approaches. We spent a lot of time talking about the process at the treatment plant. And we could have, potentially rebuilt, like I said earlier, we could have built the treatment plant for about $60 million, about $30 million less than it's costing right now. But it would not have met the regulations in 2030 that we anticipate coming from DEQ. So we would have had to do more modifications, to the water side of the treatment plant. And so all things considered, I think we moved in the right direction, that had a significant impact to residents, no doubt about it, but it probably had the least amount of impact overall in the long term.
Thanks. That's what I'm remembering as you're recounting it, and I hope that's helpful both to the council and to the public. Appreciate that. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Decker before I open it up for public comment? Go ahead, Councilor Whipple.
So I just want to make sure I understand the story correctly. We had bonded for it to do the project. We started working on it. The state's, saying, great, your project is good.
Yep.
Cost goes up by $20 million. So we're like, okay, we're going to cut out some things so that we can stay in budget. And the state's like, that's a bad idea. We want you to do your full project. We're going to find ways for you to get the additional money that you need to do this. And in the end, it will cost less to go ahead and do the project with the additional bonding now than it would be to wait until the regulations come in 2030 to build what we'd have to do then.
Yeah, we could go back to the state and simply say, we don't want to build the bioreactor, but the bioreactor is going to be required to deal with nitrogen in the future regulation. So at some point when that regulation comes in, again, about 2030 is what we're getting told, we would have to build the bioreactor no matter what. Because you can't deal with nitrogen at the levels they're talking about. You cannot reduce nitrogen out of the effluent to the levels using the process that we have currently at the treatment plant.
And we don't see any indication that construction prices would drop significantly between now and 2030.
I wish I could say yes to that question.
So it's probably better to suck it up and take care of it now, use this opportunity the state's giving us to build the facility the way we originally wanted to.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see any other questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Decker. We'll now open it up for public comment. And I have someone online. I'll call first, and then, sir, you can come to the podium. Melanie McCord, go ahead.
Okay, I just listened to Dave Decker's briefing and found it unsatisfactory. And when he said that we need to be planning for future requirements, I nearly choked. In 2000, when Provo's census report came back that we had passed 100,000 residents, we were required at that time by federal water standards to put in place a tertiary treatment center. We received not one, not two, but 3 5-year extensions getting ready on having to build that system. And during that time, you're talking about what would have been the least painful financially. What would have been was a little bit of foresight. if in 2000 we had raised rates slightly and raised them every year, we would be able to build this system without a loan, without bonding. There are requirements that we are placed under by both EDQ and by the federal government that I don't think the council is informed about. And as a result, 2 different administrations, now 3, kicked this problem down the road until finally the state came to give us an option on how to get out of it. It was just short-sighted, and it tells again why we desperately need a public works board to monitor things like our water quality, our air quality, and some of the rest of these things that we're required to report to the state that the council never hears about. I promise you that this could have been done better. And I promise you that this is not the first time that the council has been caught short. Years ago, Gil Miner was on the energy board, and he kept warning and warning that our infrastructure was going to need upgrading. But they just kicked it down the road, years and years, until finally we had to bond for some major repairs. I just don't think we do this very well, and I think that one of the ways we can do it better is to have better public oversight. So please form a public works board and have them look at some of these things. And Dave Decker do a better job at briefing the council.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir. Please state your name and your city of residence.
Walter Crawford, Provo. If I'm not mistaken, the buildings that they're putting in are actually going to help eliminate the algae and the toxicity of Utah Lake. Now, is that correct?
I think eliminate is maybe too strong of a word, but mitigate.
Reduce the amount of algae, reduce the amount of toxicity in Utah Lake that has built up over the many years. I'm for that. The other problem I have is I've been paying into this for the last 30 plus years, living in Provo, owning a home, and I'm on septic. The whole area in which I live, my system is still on septic tanks. We're not hooked up to any sewer system at all. So when is the city going to address that? And we are in Provo City and have been for 30 years. This is 2020, people. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? Do you want to tell us where you live, sir?
1585 North, 2300 West.
Okay, thank you.
Hi there. Just for the record, again, my name is Eric Kim. It seems that whatever Melanie says, it's the exact same thing that I keep thinking about. That my understanding, raw sewage was being dumped into the Utah Lake up until 1967 or 1963, whichever year, and a large recurrent problem. You know, you try to keep the bureaucracy to a minimum and allow people, the residents, to make the decisions, but it goes a long way sometimes to have other groups that monitor these things for problems down the line. You know that nobody knew that putting carp into the Utah Lake was going to lead to all the problems that it does today, including needing to pay for the removal of all those carp later on, and for the phosphorus issues and for the infrastructure issues with wastewater treatment. But what I do see is a lot of aging infrastructure every time I go through, especially the west side, actually, with Provo west of Center Street, and that's again, I don't speak for every BYU student. Obviously, I've only been here for 2 years, so really I've only been a taxpayer for 2 years and not for 20 to 30 years. But again, I feel like there's a lot of us that are looking to stay and that we want to see, what do you call, not just up-to-date infrastructure on the houses and in the neighborhoods, but also up-to-date infrastructure that we can trust with wastewater treatment and with transformer substations as well, going with what was discussed earlier during the work meeting. That's all.
Thank you. Any other comment? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council. Mr. Jones, so are we now discussing the vote that we, on item number 9, is that?
Yes, yeah, if public comment is over, then you can move on, the public hearing is over and you can move on to number 9, have your discussion and hold your vote.
Okay. All right, any discussion, Councilor Shipley?
Just with respect to this, just purely financially, where we're at today with the situation, with the plant, with the shortfall on completing the project, I don't see, I can't think of a better scenario than a $10 million loan at 0.5% and a $5 million grant to complete what needs to be completed here. So, you know, there are a lot of other issues that we've talked about, but getting this opportunity from the state, I think we'd be silly. I think we'd be crazy to not move forward with this.
Councilor McKay?
I agree with Dave, and there's no doubt that the can was kicked down the road in the past, and people are aware of that, and that's being remedied now. And there's things in place to pay for depreciation, pay for capital improvements. And I think the important thing is that currently we are on the right road and not going to make the same mistake that was made in the past to put us in this situation.
Thank you. Mr. Fillmore. Mr. Fillmore?
Gotcha. I was going to say that regardless of whatever second guessing we may want to indulge in with respect to past decisions or non-decisions or opportunities lost, whatever, the fact is that we are at where we were at today, and we're being offered some assistance, major assistance, that we would be very foolish, in fact, negligent as a city council to turn our backs on. We're going to have to take care of this wastewater situation in any event, and to take care of it now is most prudent, particularly with the terms that are being offered us. So I'm fully supportive of what Mr. Decker is proposing.
Thank you. Other comments from the council? Go ahead, Councilor Whipple.
Yeah, I agree that we could bemoan the lack of foresight in the past, but that's all the more reason that we need to act right now so that we aren't repeating those mistakes. And where we've got the opportunity to get this facility that we need now and in the future, we should do it.
Yeah, I'll just add my support along the same lines as my colleagues. I think, as I recalled, it was like in my very first couple of months on the council when we were having those discussions, and I ran for city council so that I could work for future generations. And it seemed to me we had to be thinking 10, 20, 30 years down the road. And that was the right frame to make the kinds of decisions we had to make, and in order to avoid the problems that happen when you don't do that, right? Which it seemed to me we were looking at it not only in terms of the wastewater issue, but also other issues in the city. And so it's hard to make these decisions because of the sacrifice it means we're asking our community to make. But I like to think, knowing, I mean, literally, I think it's something like 60 to 80% of our population are our own posterity. It's not, so when we're making decisions for the future, we're making decisions for our own, not necessarily for people we will never know. And so I think it feels right to me to make a decision today that will not only be financially sensible under the circumstances we're facing, but it will provide a healthier lake for us going into the future. So I'm fully supportive. All right, if there's no other discussion from the council, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. I'll begin with Councillor Shipley.
Yes.
Councillor McKay.
Yes.
Chair Hoban.
Yes.
And I, George Hanley, will vote yes. Councillor Ellsworth is excused. Councillor Fillmore.
Yes.
Councillor Whipple.
Yes.
Okay, that is 6 in favor, none opposed, and 1 excused. Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to item number 10, an ordinance amending design standards for the Westgate Gateway Zone Citywide application. This will be presented by Dustin Wright, City Planner.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to present this item and just kind of go over a little bit of it. So the applicant has requested this text amendment to be able to change the gateway zone, or the West Gateway Zone design standards to meet those of our other downtown and gateway zones, to match those and be consistent with the design standards for that. The goal here was to improve the gateway into our city through these design standards that get implemented when new projects come in as redevelopment happens. They would develop those properties in that location with those standards to help improve the arrival into the city as that key gateway. So the applicant has requested this text amendment. If there's specific questions you have on those, I can kind of go through them. But that's basically what we're looking at with this text amendment.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Wright? Yes. Councilor McKay.
Many questions. I'll wait for city. I'm curious about this one in regards to just how expensive construction costs are, right? I'm worried about it, especially where a lot of these properties would need to be developed from the ground up, that it's going to make it a lot more expensive and less likely that they will be developed. I'm wondering if, I don't even know what the zones are there, but I'm wondering if are we changing the zones at all to make them taller or allow for smaller square footage, say if it's apartment or something, to help pencil that as more doable for a developer or someone who does want to redevelop that area?
So this amendment doesn't change any of those, the height or any of those requirements. So in this area, the West Gateway zone, I think kind of address those, and those are a little bit less intense as they are as you move into the gateway and the downtown zones. But as far as construction costs, we know that those are, at pretty high levels right now. Design standards don't always necessarily mean more costs. In some cases, obviously, some of those do, but really it's just creating a cohesive fill that you can recognize that, okay, you're entering into the downtown of the city based off of what you can observe. So there's elements like that in the design standards that don't necessarily cost more per se, but help provide that visual appeal and that that destination feel of when you arrive there. So that's part of it. As far as looking at finding ways to make these zones more financially feasible, it's something I think we can always be looking into. But I think also key goal there is making sure we still maintain that desire of having a good gateway into our downtown.
For sure. I appreciate that. And that is something I want also. So like normal rezoning, people could look at it, you could look at it in development services, proposal by proposal and do them, and try and make things work. We're just such an extreme construction time. And, okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Fillmore.
Here we go. For a couple of years now, one of my key hopes and objectives has been to enhance the gateways into our city, particularly the primary gateway, which is from 5th West Center Street out to I-15. And I appreciate Councilor McKay's concern about rising costs. Unfortunately, we don't have any control over that. That's a market factor, and we're not going to do much to affect that. I think the goal here is to create a gateway and a primary entranceway into the city that is worthy of Provo as we continue to grow and enhance our city, and particularly the rejuvenation of the downtown area. I think we simply have to address the relatively benighted stretch of West Center, and not just to beautify it, but to make it more welcoming and inviting to various developers, retail establishments. We can only do that by elevating the design standards. And once we start that and initiate more of that on West Center, it'll be a more inviting environment for other developers to come in, and they'll have to deal with construction costs, but it will be more inducive to them to do so. So I welcome this amendment and hope that it will pass with our full support.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. Any questions before I open it up for public comment? We'd love to hear from Quinn Peterson. Go ahead. Yeah.
So this was my application. I'd love to just tell you a little bit about it. So I'm the chair of the design review committee currently. So we approve architectural and landscape renderings for every project in the city. And one of the reasons this came to our attention was this being the gateway, as Bill did just say, it is the first impression of our city. And if there's any area that needs design standards, it's absolutely the gateway. One of the reasons it's alarming is because there's a project that's happening right in that corridor currently. We have the Maverick on 9th West. One block further west, 1000 West, there was an abandoned gas station that's been demolished and it's under construction currently. We approved architectural renderings. They demolished and it's been sitting roughly a year. They came back to us to say, hey, sorry, we know you approved our renderings, but we're out of budget. We don't have any more funds. So this is our new proposal and it's 100% stucco. And I said, this is alarming. This is a really crummy welcome to Provo. And we had no way to enforce any design standards in this corridor because they were removed in this little outlined red pocket that you see. There are currently none. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen again and that we have design standards moving forward that to comment on the cost concern, they're not overly cumbersome. It's just the fact that we're going from nothing to something. And they're the same design standards that we have throughout the downtown that just talk about building material types and so on, that just give us as a design review committee, for example, something to compare when we're making a judgment call when we see proposals that come to us. We're excited about a lot of the demand in the downtown, and I have a massive list of buyers, developers, businesses, people, and projects that want to be in the downtown. And so when it comes to potentially discouraging developers, I really don't think that that'll be a factor here. What questions do you have for me before I leave you?
Councilor Whipple.
So one of my favorite buildings in this area is that ASAP Automotive Warehouse parts, very cool cantilever stuff.
On the south side?
Yeah, on the south side, the blue and teal. So imposing a design standard will not affect very cool existing buildings like that.
For new projects only.
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore?
Yes, question for Quinn. As I look at what's outlined in red, I'm curious about the southwest and southeast corners that are excluded from the red boundary. Is there a reason to exclude them since they're also part of the gateway, Quinn?
Yeah, so outside of the red boundary is kind of a pinkish hue, at least on the east side. That area actually already has the exact design standard that we're trying to impose on the outlined area. The history here is that there was a design standard in this area and there was a great project, and maybe Dustin mentioned this. I came in late, but did we mention the gas station that came in? Okay. And so that was changed for a project. So the rest of the gateway already has the design standard that we're attempting to implement. Now, when it comes to the southwest side, that's an unknown. I do believe that's actually RDA property. And so the city will have a little bit of sway and control as far as what project goes into that in the future. But yeah, southeast and the rest of the gateway already has a design standard.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any comments from the public on this item?
Becky Bogdan, Provo, Utah. I like it. I do. And some of those people that I know that live around there, you know, I really can't speak for them, but I really think they would like it too. Because when you find something as you come into your neighborhood that's beautiful, it just makes you want to do better and want to be better. And it's right close to my kids' school, and I like it. I don't like what's there now, and I don't want it to be done halfway. I think it would be a lot better to have design standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we have a comment online. Go ahead, I think, 1192.
It's Melanie again. Patrice asked an interesting question about what kind of things we could do. How far away is the downtown economic development zone from this area? And has it been considered to expand it to offer the same kind of perks that were offered, say, in the Todd zone or downtown to this area to redevelop? Maybe you've already discussed that and I missed it. But that's my question.
She just hung up. I'm not quite sure I heard her. It was
Asking about the downtown redevelopment zone, what other incentives and financial offerings there may be to help improve these sections? I think.
Yeah, I heard development zone. So
So
sorry, it was a
saying that
little
they're like
muffled.
currently available downtown, but this area is excluded. Do you know about what?
So we've historically had lots of different improvement incentives. Sometimes they're federal dollars. We have the facade grant program. We have stuff that's been done with RDA. We have the CDBG. Those are all earmarked for slightly different projects. Sometimes they get applied in the downtown. She may be referencing the facade grant program is the only thing I can think of that is geographically bound to restore the historic facades. That program has expanded, and I do believe it would include this region here. Those are federal dollars that we apply for every year to help redo facades. It's a matching grant program for any person that comes in to bring a new business and jobs. They get federal dollars. I do believe this is included, but if it's not, we could easily include it. We just have to renew every year. And I believe it already is included. I don't know that's exactly what she was asking. That's the only thing that comes to mind.
Okay, thank you. Very helpful. Okay, seeing no other public comment, I'll bring it back to the council for discussion. This is an item, this is the first time we've heard this item, and does any council member desire to consider this item again at the next council meeting? Okay, seeing none then, is there any more discussion on this item before I call for a vote on the implied motion? All right, then I will call for a vote on the implied motion, and I'll begin with Councillor McKay.
Yes.
Chair Hoban?
Yes.
I, George Handley, will vote yes. Councillor Ellsworth is excused. Councillor Fillmore?
Yes, sir.
Councillor Whipple?
Yes.
Councillor Shipley?
Yes.
Okay, that vote is 6 in favor, none opposed, and 1 excused. We'll turn to item number 11, an ordinance amending the zone map, classification of approximately 0.17 acres of real property generally located at 1029 West, 1020 North from one family residential R18 to low density residential LDR. This is in the Rivergrove Neighborhood, and Dustin Wright will present. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so this request, the applicant is looking to rezone property they own to allow for development on that property to be a single-family home with an accessory dwelling unit or ADU. The current zoning R18 doesn't allow for an ADU, and so the kind of the path towards that, if that's the desire of the council, to allow that would be through the rezone to the LDR zone, which does allow for an accessory dwelling unit. The accessory dwelling unit be owner occupied, which is one of the goals in the general plan to help establish more owner occupancy in these neighborhoods. So when we look at these, we look at general plan, we look at the general plan map. Residential is what is shown on the general plan map. We look at the surrounding area to see if that would fit within the neighborhood. So if we've got the slides, there we go. So here's the applicant's property outlined in red that they're proposing the rezone for. The homes on the kind of to the east, down 100 west there, there's duplexes. I've got a slide separate if we want to take a look at that later, but just kind of showing the general area, how there's kind of a handful of duplexes in this area along with the single family homes. And so we look at that component of it, see if there be that compatibility, if there be negative impacts, things like that within the neighborhood. The Planning Commission reviewed this item and has forwarded a positive recommendation for this rezone request. The public purpose being that it would help incentivize more owner occupancy and generally fits within the character of the existing neighborhood there. So that's the request the applicant is bringing before you today. If there's any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer those now.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Any questions? Mr. Hoban?
Yeah, I'm wondering, Mr. Jones, does it, well, I guess in general, I don't really like the idea of like one-off spot zoning ADUs because I'm worried it's just going to lead to more applicants, more applications like this. And we've established a process of our committee is going to make recommendations of where to roll out ADUs. But in any case, does it establish any legal precedent if we were to approve an ADU? Then can somebody come and say, well, I'm in R18 as well. I have enough land. I have enough parking. Why can't I get approved? And then if it doesn't establish legal precedent, I guess for city staff, does it establish any sort of like precedent of, okay, well, we're probably going to get more applications now. It's going to send a signal that, this is what we want to look at. Can I get those questions answered?
Sure, would be happy to respond to those, Chair Hoban. So legally, no, it doesn't create any precedent. Zoning applications are one-offs. Each of them is handled on a case-by-case basis, and you have, as a council, entire discretion to grant or deny them. I won't speak for zoning staff about the precedent it creates for them, but as your advisor, I would say to the second half of your question, yes, it creates a signal from the council that you are willing to entertain those kind of applications. Once you approve one, you have signaled that there is at least a possibility that you will consider others. So as a policy matter, there certainly is, for you to consider, there certainly is the idea that approving this kind of application may lead to more such applications. The other thing that you need to be aware of as far as legal precedent may be the wrong word, but legal issues is that if the only reason well, you need to recognize that if the purpose of the rezone is to allow the ADU rather than to allow a use that is allowed by the underlying zone, that's all well and good. But remember that once you change the zone, all of the uses that are allowed by the new zone are now allowed. So I guess to put that in simpler terms, somebody could come in and say, rezone this to LDR so that I can have an ADU. And 2 years from now, somebody could knock down the house and build anything that LDR allows. But I saw Bill Pepperoni walking up. I don't know if he wanted to respond to the staff portion of the question.
So I agree that it will potentially send a message that the council is open-minded to this. I do agree it doesn't set a precedent. One thing that makes this different than other places or other situations is this is adjacent to a property that is a duplex, and on down 1000 West are duplexes. So it's not introducing a new product type into the neighborhood that's not there already. That's different than other R18 rezoning requests like this you may get. So that's one way that the council could differentiate between saying yes to one and no to another in terms of setting a precedent, that type of thing, that type of reasoning. Just because a city takes a small piece of property and rezones it, that's not spot zoning. We didn't have to amend the general plan to do this. It's not introducing a product type that's not already in the area, so it wouldn't meet the criteria for spot zoning. In terms of Brian's point about other uses permitted in the zone, and I'm sure Mr. Wright was about to say this before I interrupted him. This piece of property is small enough that you can't do anything else with it in the LDR zone. They couldn't come in and try to do townhomes or something else in that zone. A single family home with an accessory unit is all they can do based on the size of that lot in the LDR zone. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Whipple.
Yeah, I was just going to back up that with numbers because this property is 0.17 acres. So that's 7,400 square feet. And in our code right now, for that lot area with 4,000 square feet, you can do a one family detached. You could have an accessory dwelling unit, but you have to have at least 8,000 square feet in order to do a duplex, or 10,000 to do the one family attached. So even by rezoning this would be the only possible thing that they could do, or I guess a one family home without an ADU.
Okay, thank you. It's very helpful, Mr. Shipley.
I just have a question. So on our current ADU policy, we have zones that are legal for ADUs, but then we also have basically a map to reference of area that it's not zone specific. So what keeps us in the future on this one or in the future from just saying, refer to the map and including this particular lot on that map instead of actually rezoning the property?
That's a great question. I guess the answer would be nothing except for perhaps the way the code is written. And I don't think they've updated it in the code yet, so I don't think I can actually see what it says without trying to find the ordinance. The map only pertains to certain zones, and I don't remember if R18 is one of them. That's the issue. So you could add something to the map if it was R16, but you can't add something to the map if it's R18 because of the way we described the map. We could change that, but the way it's currently written, it wouldn't work.
All right. If that's the end of questions, we can open this item for public comment, unless the applicant would like to make a comment.
Hello, my name is Philip, and I just wanted to thank you guys again for the opportunity for looking at this. We also have desires to increase affordable, sustainable housing in Provo City, and we hope that this is one way that we can do that and contribute to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from the public on this item? Or neighborhood chairs, for that matter?
Yes, I'm Harrison, neighborhood chair. And I'm Aaron Scabwin, neighborhood chair of the Rivergrove Neighborhood. So I just wanted to report, as I did to the Planning Commission last week, that we held a neighborhood meeting in regards to this. I invited all those who were within a certain radius of the property. John was there. We had several members of the neighborhood there as well. We didn't take a vote because it was not necessary, but unsolicited, there was unanimous support for this to happen. And as the neighborhood chair, I would like to express that, as Dustin pointed out, there are duplexes nearby in the wider neighborhood. We have a variety of forms of housing. We have townhomes and apartments and a variety of forms of housing. We're comfortable with that as a neighborhood, where we like people in our neighborhood. We would like more people in our neighborhood. So we don't have a problem with this. We're very supportive, and we hope that this will not. It won't set a precedent, but we hope that others will follow suit in our neighborhood and beyond. And we hope that the city will make it possible elsewhere in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for discussion. This is the first time this item has been heard. So does any council member desire to consider this item again at the next council meeting? Councilor McKay.
I have a comment. Is this the time?
If I can just get an answer to that question, it doesn't sound like anyone wants to delay it. So I don't see anyone online. So yeah, go ahead.
I watched the planning commission on this, and changing zoning, I think, is just a big deal for neighborhoods. And I am worried about the Pandora's box, so to speak, that this could open up. I know that we are looking at increasing ADUs, and we're working on that as a council. And we do have I really want neighborhoods to want it. If they want it, I'm happy to give it to any neighborhood that wants it, at like a majority. But I think it's a big deal to change zoning for neighbors who bought into certain zoning, so to speak. So the planning commission had this somewhat concern on that. And I know that they had a neighborhood meeting, but I know there are also only like 3 or 4 neighbors there. And I know that that's not due to any fault of the neighborhood and trying to get them to come there. But I wish we had a way to just get a better read of a majority or a larger group of, what they really think.
Thank you, Mr. Hoban.
Yeah, I'm definitely sensitive to the fact that, this is one ADU. It sounds like if an ADU makes sense, this is a good place for it. I think I'm just more so, maybe I'm focused on process a little bit. And I guess I would look at it kind of how Councilor McKay is looking at it with, I don't know how to articulate this, but it seems to me it might be that in my mind it's best to hold off on, and I used the wrong word, I guess. I used a spot rezone, but I'm just saying rezoning one specific little thing when we are taking a look at the bigger picture right now. So I would say it sounds like maybe Rivergrove might be a good neighborhood to consider an overlay, requesting an overlay. And so I would prefer that we maybe look at that path for them first, if that's what the neighborhood is wanting. And then also let's see what comes out of committee from our housing committee on this as well, rather than just start to, I personally think we're probably going to get, I wouldn't say a flood of applications, no, by any means, but we definitely are going to have to hear more of these. And it probably makes sense in my mind to just kind of follow the process we have in place rather than start to entertain, anybody who's got a home and there's duplexes close by. Well, hey, why can't I do that as well? So I just think we will probably get more applications, and rather than start down that path, let's look at the path we already have in place, or the process we already have in place. So that's my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments, discussion? Councilor Whipple.
So I would say that this applicant is following the process that is in place right now. And I think it would be terrible to stop somebody who's gone through the process that we've set up for them and make them wait for however long it's going to take our housing committee to look at doing a new overlay or expanding ADUs through a larger area. I see no reason to deny them when they've jumped through the hoops that we currently have set up for them, with the thought that there might be different hoops in the future.
I'll add my thoughts. I think if this rezone request had more implications than it does at this point, I see essentially none. I mean, in terms of replicability elsewhere, I think Mr. Pepperoni explained that pretty well, the size of it, the structures around it. So it doesn't feel like there's this risk that we're creating a precedent that we couldn't say no to another request that didn't seem appropriate for asking some of the same kinds of questions. So I'm not worried about that. And that's also another reason why I'm not worried about passing this tonight, but then encouraging the Rivergrove neighborhood to consider, if they want an overlay zone, that we would entertain that as well. But I think I agree with Councilor Whipple about wanting to be fair to the property owner to do something that's going to help them, be able to make their property more affordable and what they want. Councilor, any other councilors before Councilor Hoban speaks again?
Yeah,
go ahead. Mr. Fillmore, go ahead.
I'll be honest, I'm kind of straddling the fence on this one. I'm sensitive to the position that's been articulated by a few of my fellow councilors that we ought to let our current process go forward. I think that's a general rule. That's certainly a better way to do it, so that we make macro decisions and avoid a plethora of micro decisions. But I'm also rather persuaded that this is such a unique one-off that it doesn't really trouble me if we were to approve this under these unique circumstances in this particular location.
Thank you. Mr. Hoban?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to be heartbroken if we approve it. I just think it's important for us to be cognizant of kind of the message we're sending, that, we're gonna look at these one-offs, and if that ends up, I'm sure the planning commission is not going to want to spend time on these. They would prefer that we have kind of more of a big picture policy in place, rather than having to hear these on a regular basis. Now, maybe they don't end up on a regular basis, I'm not sure, but we open up that door. And also, to Councilor Whipple's point, he is following the process, yes, but the process also at this point, that property is not zoned for LDR. So we're making an exception, and we don't have to make an exception. We have a zoning in place already. And so we have every right to say, it's not the type of door we want to open right now, and hang tight and let's see if we can get an overlay, or let's see if, what opens up for ADUs in the near future. So in any case, I don't want to come across as too adversarial. I'm not going to be heartbroken here by any means, but I just, I like to be kind of smart about how we go about things. And I think that there's a better way than kind of opening up this door, but I'll rest my case. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilor McKay.
Yeah, just to expound on that a bit, I just think changing a zone is a big deal. And if one-offs pop up all over the city, it affects each of those neighborhoods, each of those surrounding communities. And I think there needs to be, I think the community needs to want it. The neighborhood needs to want it as a whole. I think it does affect the surrounding area and is relevant when people have bought into a zone or a community or a neighborhood. I just think it takes some consideration.
I'll say
Shipley.
Yeah, this is going to sound radical, but I'm generally supportive of ADUs. And so because of that, I guess I'm persuaded in this particular situation and probably would be in any or most situations that if we have a situation where our committee can't, come to some conclusion on a widespread overlay or at least a significant expansion of ADUs at some point, I want people to be able to come forward and have an opportunity to have an ADU. So yeah, I guess my thought is that I'm persuaded in this particular situation, LDR doesn't pose a risk. There could be situations where people come and say, hey, I want to do an LDR and I've got room, and we could see how there would be other possible scenarios that could take place and it could pose a risk. And if that's the case, I think we should evaluate that. But I guess I'm just, based on my experience now on the committee trying to get ADUs moved forward, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be very challenging. So I don't mind, in a situation where I think it makes sense for this particular spot to say, look, in the meantime, let's let this person move forward.
Thank you. Councilor Whipple.
I agree that I think time is of the essence for this applicant and we need to move forward. Also, I don't think we're opening up some brand new door. If you look at our zoning map, you can see there are all sorts of little patchwork bits and pieces. This is not something new. This is the process that we have had established for years to address particular needs for properties. And it's not that we're inviting a lot more work. We are using established processes until we as a council and the housing committee get our act together enough that we can do a new overlay so that that additional work is no longer necessary. But this is the process that we have now. This is the process that we've been using. This isn't something new that's opening floodgates. And so I have no objection to approving this.
I think you might be answering a question I had. Do you want to say something, Mr. Jones?
Well, I was just asked a question about what happens if there's a tie vote tonight.
Because we're missing a counselor.
Yeah. A tie vote doesn't necessarily kill something. I mean, it kills it to the extent that it doesn't pass, and then somebody has to ask for it to be back on the agenda. But if there was a vote, so you've got a few options. One is for two counselors to ask for it to be continued until next time, invoking the rule that you already asked about earlier. Another option would be to take the vote, and if it results in a tie, somebody could make a motion to continue it to the next meeting to see, but then that motion would have to pass by a majority of those present. Or even if it fails, council leadership could decide to put it back on at a future point, because it's still an open subject, but it's dead and on the table until somebody takes it off the table, essentially. So.
Yes, my thought on that and the discussion there was if we tie tonight, knowing that, someone that wasn't here, Councilor Ellsworth, has the deciding vote, I think it would make sense for the leadership to just place it back on for a revote. So I don't know that we need to officially continue it. If we had a tie vote tonight, I think I would encourage leadership to just put it back on for a vote.
I don't know how Mr. Hoban feels. I certainly would want to do that. So even if.
Yeah, I have no qualms with putting it back on. I also have no qualms if we want to continue it. My guess is Councilor Ellsworth would be supportive of this type of move, but I don't want to put words in her mouth. So, So we can continue it or we can put it back on. Either way, it's fine.
Thank you. Mr. Fillmore.
I have been mulling over the concern that Mr. Hoban has raised, and that is that we may really be multiplying the workload for the planning commission if we go ahead and approve this and incentivize people to come in on the same basis. And I'm frankly kind of leaning towards casting one vote for putting it off a couple of weeks and inviting Mr. Scablin to go back to his neighborhood and see if the entire neighborhood has more of an appetite for expanding, for doing an overlay zone in that particular neighborhood. Maybe we could use them as a bit of an ADU experiment and see what happens. I don't know. I'm just kind of unsettled on this particular application.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
If I could just make a comment about, and I don't know if Bill Pepperoni wants to kind of give his thoughts on the same point, but to the idea that you're sending signals, I don't think those signals are being sent in a vacuum, right? I mean, if the concern is that by approving this, that's going to create a flood of applications, I think planning staff is perfectly capable of saying to every one of those applicants, look, the council debated for an hour when they approved. Just the fact that they approved it doesn't mean anything. They debated for an hour and they said, and here are all the reasons they said this is probably the only one that they would approve. So I don't think that there's do you understand what I'm saying? I don't think it's happening in a vacuum where there's no context and everyone will just apply without getting any feedback about the likelihood of their proposal going forward.
I see Mr. Pepperoni nodding his head. Do you want to make any comment to that effect?
Yes, what you and the planning commission never see are all of the bad proposals we filter out as the staff.
Okay, thank you. All right. Councilor Whipple.
Yeah, so looking at this property right now, it looks like all that's on it at this point is a little carport. And so if I understand correctly, the proposal would be to build the house and the ADU. So there aren't that many empty lots that are available for this kind of development within the city of Provo that are, tiny little lots that don't already have a house built on them. And if you wanted a single family home to add an ADU in an area where it's not already allowed, it would either need to be an empty lot like this, or it would need to be a home that could lend itself to being divided up to have an ADU. And if it's a little house on a little lot, it's pretty unlikely that the family would want to cut their house in half. I really don't see this opening floodgates.
I'll add, my feelings are similar. I mean, we're not too long away from having some proposals to look for on the council. By the time that happens, I'll be shocked if there are more than two, I'll venture to guess, that come forward to the city. And maybe both of those get told no by Mr. Pepperoni, so we never even hear about them. I just think this is such a safe choice that I'm not at all worried about the risk. And frankly, if more people start beating on the door saying they want ADUs, that's what they want. And that's a good signal to the city to change, make some accommodations for those needs. So I'm not worried about that. So I'm willing to vote. I'll ask the question again, though. What's that? Yes.
I just did want to add the second point. What that was brought up is that Rivergrove should poll its neighborhood and see if it would like to add an ADU overlay, the S overlay. And I think that is a great idea, but this applicant should not be held up on that issue. I would love to have that information for the housing committee as we're looking at how ADUs should be allowed within our city. Like, that is exactly the kind of information that we want, but I think that is irrelevant to this project.
Okay, so I'll just ask the question again. Does any council member desire to consider this item again at the next council meeting in light of our discussion? If not, I'll call for a vote. All right. I will call for a vote on the implied motion, and we'll begin with Chair Hoban.
No.
I, George Hanley, will vote yes. Counselor Ellsworth is excused. Counselor Fillmore? I think you're still muted.
I think I'm going to rely on Bill Pepperoni's wise discretion and vote yes.
Counselor Whipple?
Yes.
Counselor Shipley?
Yes.
Counselor McKay?
No.
Okay, so that was 4 votes in favor, 2 against, and 1 excused. Counselor Ellsworth excused. Thank you. Thanks for your time tonight. All right, if there's no objection, we will now adjourn the Provo Municipal Council meeting and reconvene as the Redevelopment Agency of Provo by unanimous consent. And I will turn the time over to Vice Chair Whipple of the RDA.
Thank you. So for our RDA business tonight, we will be looking at a resolution amending the bylaws of the Redevelopment Agency of Provo City Corporation regarding executive committee meetings. John Magnus, our policy analyst, will be presenting this.
Good evening, members of the RDA. It's pretty straightforward. Right now, our bylaws require us to meet once a month. For the last 2 months, we've had nothing to meet about, but we've had a meeting. So we started discussing about changing the bylaws so we meet once a quarter or earlier if needed. If a project does come forward before we can have a meeting, we would hold another meeting. So it just lets us have some flexibility so we don't have to schedule meetings when there's nothing to talk about. All we're asking for is to change. I think it's a matter of 3 words. Could you pull up the roll it up? Roll up the so they can see the amendment. That's it. That's all we're changing. Striking out a quarter and fiscal. Any questions?
Just kidding.
Do we have any questions or discussion from the council? Or, I'm sorry, not from the council, from the board. We are the redevelopment board now. It's a different entity. So any board members, discussion? Is there any online? I can't see it as well as you can, George.
No, there is not.
All right. In that case, do we do a motion?
We do need a motion in this case because the RDA hasn't formally adopted the same procedural rules as the council. So we just need a motion and a second.
I will make a motion that we approve the resolution as written.
I'll second that.
Excellent. Okay, now we will do a roll call vote based on that. We will start with board member Fillmore.
Yes.
Mr. Handley?
Yes.
Mr. Hoban?
Yes.
Ms. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Shipley?
Yes.
And then I'm Whipple and I will vote yes. So, and board member Ellsworth is excused, so it was unanimous for everyone voting. If there's no objection, we will now adjourn the Redevelopment Agency of Provo Governing Board by unanimous consent. Okay, that's it.